Hey, so did you ever want to know everything about the medical science liaison role from A to Z? Well, this is the video for you. Stay tuned. All right. So, the medical science liaison role, it's one of the fastest growing positions in the pharmaceutical industry. Everybody wants to be a medical science liaison. So, in this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about being a medical science liaison, including the most comprehensive overview on certifications for being a medical science liaison. There's a lot of information out there. I'm going to give you the real insider scoop on how it works. So, first, what is a medical science liaison? So, if you're not sure what a medical science liaison is, these are individuals that work in the umbrella or a division of a pharmaceutical company called medical affairs. So in a pharmaceutical company, there's different divisions. One of the divisions is called medical affairs. Medical affairs really does two things for a pharmaceutical company. It is involved in data generation. That means that it's generating new clinical trial information, new data once a drug has been approved by that particular regulatory body in that country. So, for example, if you're in the US and you're listening to this in the United States, the body is the Food and Drug Administration. They approve drugs, right? They approve medicines, new medicines to enter the market. Once that medicine is approved, a pharmaceutical company will then typically deploy a medical science liaison team. A lot of times they'll begin to hire for that team and build it out about a year to year and a half before the drug has been approved. And mainly they're doing that because they want the medical liaisons to go out and educate the physicians. And they're not just educating any physicians, they're educating key opinion leaders. And so when we say data generation, we're talking about the fact that the pharmaceutical company is going to produce new data or new information about that drug for the medical community. Okay. So, first thing that the medical affairs group does is data generation. The second thing they do is data dissemination. That's where the medical liaison team comes in. Now, a pharmaceutical company can disseminate data really two main ways. First way is through a medical science liaison team, like we talked about. So, they're a field based team. They're going to go out there, educate the healthcare providers. Not just any healthcare provider. Again, they're talking to key opinion leaders or KOLs. A lot of times now they're called external experts in the industry. The other way that they educate healthcare providers is through a medical information department. If you are a pharma company, you'll have a medical information department, a call center, and you'll go out there from like the office, although post COVID now, a lot of people work from home. And what you're doing is you're responding to questions that come in from healthcare providers and from patients. But let's get back to medical science liaison. So again, they work from home and they are assigned a territory and they go out there to talk to basically the elite physicians for that territory. Okay. That's basically what they're doing. They're out there educating doctors on the disease state, the product that they're assigned to, if it's a medical device company, the device that they're working on, so forth and so on. One of the things that is really key is that medical science liaisons nowadays need to have advanced degrees. So if you want to be a medical science liaison, most companies are going to require you to have a medical degree, an MD, or an equivalent. You could have like a DO, a PhD, or a PharmD. A PharmD is a doctorate of pharmacy, but they want to have some type of professional or high-level terminal degree. Okay. Truth is that breaking into those positions is not easy. To give you an idea, out of every 100 people that apply to a position, there's only one opening, one will get accepted. So it's like one out of 100. It's hard. It's not easy to break in. And the more and more that medical science liaison roles have grown over the years, the more demanding it's become because more and more people now want to get into these roles. A lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into that in this video. But suffice it to say, what you need to know is that it is a very competitive position to get at any company. And what they're looking for really, I would kind of classify it in three categories. They're looking for people that have good scientific chops, scientific clinical chops. You're trained at a good institution, you understand science, you understand various disease states. That's all great. That's kind of like the basic, minimal requirement. You need to know the science, the data, you need to be able to understand evidence-based medicine, all that good stuff. Second thing is they're looking for people that have good business acumen, good core business skills. Sometimes we call them soft skills, but it's people that understand that really at the end of the day, you're working for a for-profit pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device, diagnostic company. I'm going to use the word pharma, but that word pharma encompasses all those different types of companies, biotech, device, diagnostics, etc. And that you understand that there's a business element to this, and that you need to be able to go out there and really help the physician see the value in working with your company, whether it's for research, whether it's for, ultimately trying to get them to prescribe the product or use it or evangelize for it. Although medical science liaisons aren't selling products, that's true. Ultimately, they're trying to position the product in a way that's going to be favorable to the healthcare provider. Of course, they're going to do it objectively, and they're going to go into a lot more depth into the information. But ultimately, right, they're working for a business, and the pharma company wants the MSL to position it in a way that's going to have the KOL feel like it's favorable. The key thought leader physician or key opinion leader physician see it as a favorable thing to use for their clinical practice or to educate people in the medical community. Okay. So that's what MSLs do. Medical science liaisons. Sometimes you'll see them called regional scientific managers. Sometimes they'll hire nurses, absolutely, especially in oncology. Sometimes they'll hire PAs as well, mainly in oncology. And sometimes they'll even hire people with master's degrees. But by and large, what I see is that they're hiring people with an MD, PhD, or PharmD. That's the majority. Now, within that group, I would say the highest by degree is PharmD. So pharmacists make up the greatest majority of that group of three of MD, PhD, and PharmD, okay? And again, what the MSLs are going out and doing is they are educating healthcare providers or key opinion leaders on the products, on the disease state. Okay, so that's what an MSL does. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about working for different types of companies. So I mentioned, pharma, biotech, device, diagnostic, etc. I'm sure you guys know what the difference is between each, but just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page, when we talk about a pharmaceutical company, a big pharma company, we're talking about companies like Pfizer, like GlaxoSmithKline or GSK, Novartis, Merck. These are big pharma companies. Generally speaking, those types of companies are going to have very big MSL teams. They could have MSL teams in the hundreds, maybe even into the thousands, right? Because they'll have a global medical affairs group. Remember, medical science liaisons sit within the medical affairs division or the medical affairs department. Now, when you go to these smaller companies, whether it's mid-sized pharma, biotech companies, they're going to be a little bit scrappier, right? They're not going to have maybe hundreds of MSLs. They might have, for example, in the United States, a team of like 10 to 15 MSLs. Sometimes I've even seen it as small as like 5 MSLs for the whole country, where each MSL is, assigned a particular territory or geography in the country. People always ask, do I apply with a recruiter? Do I apply on my own? Obviously, if you could apply on your own, that's better because you have to remember, from a hiring perspective, pharmaceutical companies have to pay a premium to the recruiter to find talent. The recruiter works by getting a percentage of the salary that you're going to get. So, for example, if you get hired by a company and you were placed there by the recruiter and you end up staying there for a certain period of time, that recruiter will get a percentage of that $100,000 base salary, not from you, from the company. So company might have to dish out another $20,000, $30,000 for placing John Smith or Jane Smith at that company. So the company, from a budgetary standpoint, they prefer to probably hire directly. But sometimes those positions aren't always posted by the company. They'll be posted by the recruiter. The recruiter will put it out there and say it's, confidential company. And you apply and you don't even realize sometimes that you're applying through to the recruiter. Working with recruiters is interesting. You need to make sure that you have the right recruiters that you're working with, that they're ethical. There's a few good recruiting companies out there that I would recommend. One of them for sure is called Green Key Resources. They're a great company, Green Key. They actually have done a lot of work in the pharmaceutical industry, so I definitely recommend working with them. That's one that comes to mind. And there are others, of course, as well. Now, people ask me a lot of times, because I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I was MSL. I managed MSLs. I worked in medical affairs. I've done it all. what's the best way for me to break in? Will it actually make a difference if I get certified to actually get into the industry? Will that help me to get board certified or certified? Because now in the last 10 years or so, there's been many certifications that have come out for medical science liaison. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about all those different certifications comprehensively so you understand the difference. And again, just like I talked about at the outset of the video, I'm going to cover this topic A to Z so that really gives you all the information that you need right here in this video. One of the certifications that came out probably around, I would say 4 to 5 years ago, is by an organization called From Science to Pharma, or FSTP. And they came out with what they call the Board Certified MSL, or BCMSL cert. So it's a board certification that they've developed. They charge for the board certification. It really depends on the package you get. They have 5 different packages for all the way from gold to diamond pro, and you get different things. You either get the board certification program by itself, you get, a welcome phone call with I'm not sure who. It doesn't really tell me who actually I'm going to get the call with. You get a CV review depending on the program and what you're doing. But again, the prices range from about $1,099 for just a certification all the way up to $5,000 for getting all these other things, which includes, again, different launch activities, other soft skill training, how to present a clinical paper, how to put your resume together. So that's about $5,000. That would include the certification as well. But, and I'll put a link in the video below to all these different websites, but it's not really clear, number one, who is the accrediting body. It says that they have their CPD approved, but it doesn't say they're actually accredited by them. It's not clear who CPD is. I've never heard of them. And it doesn't tell us anything about the founders or the organization that actually developed this program. And when you look at the board certification itself, it sounds like it's just a bunch of videos that is given by I'm not sure who. Again, it's not really clear. So I could tell you, working in the industry myself and talking to people in the industry, most people have never heard about FSTP or the BCMSL cert. So to me, from my perspective, I think it would be a waste to go in and pay, anywhere between $1,000 to $5,000. The other thing too is that it has nothing on there about recertification. So it doesn't tell us anywhere what actually, happens to maintain that certification. So it doesn't seem to be that legitimate from my perspective. When I tried their live chat, it seemed to be kind of fishy, some of the responses, and kind of scammy a little bit. And again, you go online, it's not really clear who actually works for the company or who's behind it. To me, that's always a big red flag. So I would be very weary of From Science to Pharma. The other organization that's been out there called IFAP, now it's called GMDP Academy, and they provide a certification program. It's not necessarily for medical affairs or MSLs only. Now, I should say for the last one, I forgot to mention from Science to Pharma, it's for people that want to break in. So it's really designed specifically for people that want to break in that have no experience, but it's not recognized. So I don't know how much value it would give the person who is trying to break in. So that's, to me, again, a big red flag. But going back to IFAP or GMDP Academy, they provide what's called the Certification in Medicines Development Program. So when I clicked on this to kind of learn more about it, it was very nebulous, the information that's there. Now, they're modules, they're not videos, but the tuition was almost $10,000. So I found that to be very, very expensive, and they're not accredited by anybody. So I wasn't, again, really sure of who signifies them in a way to offer a certificate or a certification in this area. So that really wasn't clear to me, from my perspective. So it says it's certification, but, certified by who? So again, I would be very weary of it because ultimately it is not necessarily only for MSLs and medical affairs, but it is kind of in medicines development. Tuition's really, really high. It has no accreditation. This, the content is updated and there's really no pathway for recertification. So again, not really clear on the value there. And I had never heard of it personally. The other one is the MSL Society. Now, the MSL Society is great to join. It's an organization that's great to join if you're looking for a way to network with other MSLs. They're great for that, for networking. They're great at having meetings. They're fantastic with that. Now, about 3 years ago, I believe it was, they came out with a board certification, similar to From Science to Pharma. This certification is only for MSLs. And their eligibility criteria is they have to have a bachelor's degree to actually enroll in the program. And you need to have at least a year of experience as an MSL. So you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher and a year of experience as an MSL. Now, remember, I told you that to be an MSL, you really need to have an advanced degree. So I don't know why the requirements are like this in terms of people that can actually get into the program. Now, in terms of the fees for the certification, what I found interesting was it's really no content. It's just an exam. So they're just providing an exam. The first time you take the exam, if you're a member, is $450. If you're not a member, it's a little bit more. It's about $550. And then every time you take the exam, you've got to pay a few $100s. So if you fail the exam, you got to spend another few $100s taking the next exam. The problem that I have with the MSL Society is that it's just an exam and it's only for being an MSL. What if, though, you start out as an MSL and later you want to work in medical affairs? And also, if you're new to this area, what about content in terms of training and professional development? What is actually there to help you develop yourself professionally? I didn't really see anything there. And I didn't see anything there either about recertification. There was nothing there that I saw about recertification whatsoever. Again, I think MSL Society is a good organization to join if you're looking to network. Although I would say probably only about less than 1% of the industry attends, organizational meetings like this, to be honest. I worked in the industry for a long time and I would attend, but I would say 99% of the people I work with never attended. So sometimes it's a money grab. A lot of the information you can get it right here for free on YouTube. So I'd be wary of that. So that is in their organization, MSL Society, their certification is called MSLBC. MSLBC. Okay, so it's flipped, from the science to pharma as BC MSL cert. This is MSL BC. So again, my questions there are, what's the recertification process? Where's the content? It's not really clear. Is the organization accredited? Is the certification accredited? Again, it's not really very, very clear to me. The last organization, which, in full disclosure, I'm a founder of, is the ACMA. Now, the ACMA, the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, we offer a board certification program called the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist Program, BCMAS. Now, that program is the first ever program developed in this area. So, from my perspective, a lot of these other organizations are really just copycats of the BCMAS program. BCMAS program is made up of 20 modules. So unlike the MSL Societies program, for example, where you only get an exam, here you get 20 modules and you also get a glossary, knowledge check. You also get case studies. You get 24/7 live chat support. We have an entire team that supports the people that enroll in the programs. You get connected with recruiters. You get a mentor assigned to you if you wish. So it really kind of gives you the ability to join a community of people online that are looking to do the same thing you're trying to do. More than that, it's recognized in the industry. We, within our organization, work with about 200 pharmaceutical companies, many of which have implemented the BCMAS program. The BCMAS program is $1,999. And for that, you get 4 attempts to take the exam. So again, if you kind of do a price comparison with the MSL Society, every time you take the exam, you got to pay a few $100s. If you end up failing 2 or 3 times, basically you're going to be spending over $1,000 basically just for an exam. With the BCMAS program, you're getting an entire program, which includes those 20 modules and everything else that I mentioned for $19.99. And you're getting a lot of support. And in the end, you can put that BCMAS designation. Our program, too, is actually accredited. It's accredited by the International Accreditors for Continuing Education and Training under the American National Standards Institute. It's also accredited through ACCME and ACPE. So if you're a physician or a pharmacist listening, ACCME, the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education, and the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education, they actually accredit physicians and pharmacists in the U.S. respectively to get their credits, their CE credits to maintain their licensure. So it's way, way, way more credible than these other organizations. So I do think it's important to point that out because in the end of the day, you want to go with an organization that actually is recognized in the industry. We know from other studies have been shown to help people make more money. You actually earn more. I'll put the link to that article in the video below where you earn more money. and you actually can help to further your career, not just as an MSL, but in many other areas. Because of the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist program, the BCMS program, it covers all areas of medical affairs, including MSLs. So it is by far the most comprehensive program. I could tell you from someone that worked in the industry for almost 20 years. I wish I'd had a program like this when I was in the industry because it really helped me to become much more well-rounded in my knowledge and hit the ground running in many different areas, either as a medical science liaison, as a medical director, as a medical information specialist, pharmacovigilance, you name it. That's where it's at for me, at least from my perspective. Okay, so I do want to mention that. I think it's important that you know the difference. So those are the main certifications. Now, does it help? I could tell you from the data that we have, it makes a big difference. Getting board certification gives you a lot more visibility in front of recruiters. And for many positions, they'll be very interested to see that you've actually achieved that because it shows that you're going above and beyond and that you're really committed to this particular area. Now, let's talk a little bit about the medical science liaison career path. Because for a lot of people, when they become an MSL, it becomes a lifelong thing. They're just MSLs for like 30 years. I know buddies of mine that went in as medical science liaisons and they're still doing it for 30 years. They haven't stopped. And I know other people that kind of took my route where they did something different. They kind of did a different career path when they became eventually working in the leadership positions, whether it's in the MSL space or in other areas within medical affairs. I mean, eventually, I kind of took a entrepreneurial route. So it depends really on what your goal is. If you're going to be a lifelong MSL team member, these are some things I want you to think about. The first thing I would say is that you need to think about, is this an organization you can be at long term? And number two, if it is, even if you run into problems, which you inevitably will with managers, colleagues, etc., the grass isn't always greener on the other side. One of the patterns that I see with many colleagues who work for companies, they'll work for a company for like 10 years and then they'll leave and go to a company for a year and a half, and go to another company for a year, another company for 6 months. And it's like they left that company where they were really at home for 10 years, 8 years, 12 years, and now they're bouncing around. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful because a lot of times, even if you're making some extra money in another organization, do you really have security? Do you really have upward mobility at that company? And so that's something you have to consider. You also want to consider what type of environment you want to be in. Do you want to constantly be out there traveling, working in the field, going from airport to airport if you have a big territory, driving hours a day? I used to have a territory, for example, for one of my positions where it was the Northeast Mid-Atlantic. So I was going everywhere from Boston down to West Virginia. And that was my territory. And I was on the plane, 3, 4 times a week. I was driving hours. I live in the New Jersey area. So I would drive, for example, sometimes to Maryland because it was faster than taking the plane. It's about a 3-hour drive. So you have to figure out, is that really for you, the lifestyle you want for, the foreseeable future, or are you looking for something different? Now, where is the wall? Where do you hit the wall as an MSL, so to speak, if you don't want to be an MSL? And this is something people don't talk a lot about, but it's this whole issue of, are you willing now to go in-house? When we say in-house in the pharmaceutical industry, what we mean by that is going into the office. Although I will tell you, after COVID, a lot of things changed. This idea of being in the office, it changed because a lot of people, even if they were in the office, they're still working from home. They're still at least hybrid at the very least. So that term, I think, is much looser nowadays than it was probably before COVID. But that's where you hit the wall because, I know for some positions when I was in MSL, if I wanted to move up for that company, I'd have to move. I'd have to move to the headquarters of that company. So if I was living in New Jersey, and let's say the headquarters were in, Chicago, I'd have to move to Chicago. Are you willing to do that? Because for some of these other higher level positions, especially if you're going to go internally within medical affairs, you're going to be expecting you to do that. They're going to be expecting you to actually move into the vicinity of where the headquarters are and work from the office a few times a week. So that's something you have to think about. Is that the lifestyle you want? Some people like to be remote and have that flexibility. That's what they want to do for the foreseeable future. Others want to go into the office. And I will tell you from my experience, and you're not going to like this, what I'm about to say, but going into the office is going to give you a lot more exposure to leadership. right? They're going to be seeing you day in, day out in the office. They see that work ethic. It's just easier to build relationships. So if that's something you want to do and you eventually want to be, a head of medical affairs, well, that's something that you're probably going to need to consider is, thinking about working in-house or working in an office setting. So to that point, what is the kind of the hierarchy of levels for being an MSL? What a lot of companies have done because people want to be lifelong MSL professionals, they've developed this kind of internal hierarchy for the field team. So where it's like you start off as an MSL, a senior MSL, maybe like an executive MSL, maybe like an executive director MSL. There's all these different levels. In the end, you're kind of doing the same position. You might have some additional responsibilities, but in the end, the core role is the same, but it gives people the sense of upward mobility. Now, if you decide you don't want to be an MSL and done it for a few years, now you want to move up, the next level would be really to become a manager of MSL. Sometimes that'll be called either an MSL manager or an associate director of MSLs. Then from there, you can become a director of the MSL team, eventually senior director of the MSL team. So that's kind of usually the upward mobility for MSL leadership. And what you're doing there as a leader is you're managing the MSL team, right? You're managing their metrics. You're managing, which we're going to get into, you're managing their performance as the leader. But if you decide to, I don't want to work in the MSL, kind of vertical anymore. I want to move to something else. Some of the other areas that people move into is like medical affairs strategy. That's one of the things that I did, as a medical director for a company that I worked for. So in that situation, you're going to kind of move more into the medical affairs space, maybe as a medical director. And here, you're going to be setting strategy. You're going to be involved in developing clinical trial protocols. You're going to be involved maybe in working with clinical trial sites. You're going to be involved in reviewing materials, whether it's promotional or non-promotional materials that would go out to physicians or other stakeholders. You might be going to the FDA and presenting the FDA. One of the coolest things that I did, for example, was working on a commercial. I got to work on a really cool commercial, and I was involved as the medical person in developing and making sure that the content was medically accurate and sound and aligned with the regulatory approvals that we had for that particular product. So you'll work on a lot of different things. So it's a much more versatile role than, for example, being an MSL where you're only every day just calling on physicians. That's an example of a position that you might rise into. Eventually, what you may get to is becoming the head of a medical affairs team, where you could be the vice president of medical affairs, the chief medical officer. That's kind of the big kahuna within medical affairs. Generally, those, what I've seen, are reserved for people with an MD. So generally speaking, if you want to be a VP of medical affairs or you want to be a CMO, especially a CMO, that's typically going to be for people that have an MD. And people ask why. And I learned this when I was in the industry. It's because a lot of times they're looking for people that are MDs who are licensed physicians in the US to be able to sign off on clinical trial protocols, study protocols. They want people who are licensed physicians. And that's really a liability issue, right? If you're going to have somebody who's heading up a study, you want to have somebody who's going to sign off on it that's actually a licensed physician, has experience with patients, et cetera. So generally speaking, chief medical officers will have a MD degree. Okay. I've seen many PhDs, many, PharmDs become vice presidents of medical affairs. So it's not unheard of. It happens, but it's rare. So there is that competition between MD, PhD, PharmD, even in the pharma industry. So if you're listening to this and, you're working in a hospital setting, a retail setting, if you're a pharmacist, wherever, similar to how it is in healthcare and medicine, outside in kind of those traditional fields, in the pharma industry, there's a similar kind of competition and hierarchy when it comes to where you stand based on your degrees. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is going to be about metrics, performance metrics. How do you get measured as an MSL? What do people look at to say, yes, this individual, they're doing a great job as a medical science liaison. This individual is not doing such a great job. What do they look for? So first, we should define there's two types of metrics: quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics. Quantitative metrics are simple things like how many interactions did you have this month? How long were the interactions? How many investigator-sponsored research studies were you able to bring in from your territory? How many grants? How many advisory boards have you conducted? How many presentations have you given? things like that, right? Those are quantitative. And there is a big argument you should know internally, this big debate in medical affairs about whether or not quantitative metrics are actually reflective of quality for MSL. And I think, it's a 50-50 split. I hear people say, yes, it's really important. Others that say it isn't. I'll talk about that in a separate video. But that is a big debate, quantitative versus qualitative metrics. Now, what about qualitative metrics? Well, this is different, right? This is more, for example, your manager goes out with you in the field, and the field means they're riding out with you in your car. They go visit a doctor and they observe you, how you are with that physician. Do you know your stuff? If you get asked questions, do you know how to answer the question? I've been in situations where when I was a leader of MSLs, I'll never forget this is a true story where one of my MSLs, who was a cardiologist by training, so smart guy, he was an MD, and he was at an ad board that I had sent him to go to. And I wasn't there, but there was other leadership there. He was asked questions about our particular studies, could not answer the questions. And that was on Saturday. Monday, I got a call telling me I need to fire this guy. That's a true story. And I think in the end of the day, people expect you, because you have an advanced degree, that you know your stuff, that you know how to interpret the data, that you've studied it, that you really understand it very, very, very well. So that's observational, right? Does this person understand our data in a way that's really in depth that they can have a peer-to-peer discussion with the physician? Do they understand the disease state? Do they know how to build relationships with that physician? Have they demonstrated that somehow? So those are like more of the soft types of skills they look at. They also look at how you are as a team player. Even though as an MSL you have your own assigned territory, you'll be working with your team on various projects, various initiatives, whether it's the MSL team or, for example, the larger medical affairs team. So I look at things like that. Does this individual know how to work within a team properly? Are they actually building relationships internally? Do people call on them when they have questions about X, Y, or Z? So those are more kind of these qualitative metrics that might be looked at when they come to look and see, okay, is this person doing a good job or not? In the end of the day, though, I will tell you, whether or not leadership will admit to this, I can tell you from working with many leaders, they do look at quantitative metrics. And some companies have higher metrics than others, because at the end of the day, you might have a great bunch of interactions, but if there are only 3 a month, then that goes back to the question of, okay, if you only have 3, how impactful really is that for the company? So there needs to be kind of a minimum threshold or a minimum amount of productivity, if you will, when you're an MSL. Okay. Now, the last thing is around the day in the life of an MSL. Typically, MSLs, they'll wake up in the morning and they'll either get on a plane, they'll get on a long drive to go to their territory. If you're lucky, one job that I had my territory was Manhattan. That's it. So even though it was small, it was, you can imagine, chock full of a lot of external experts or key opinion leaders. So I didn't have a lot of driving, but I could see a lot of KOLs actually in a day. Typically, you'll see 1 to 2 doctors a day. Again, it depends on the size of your territory. So you might go on a day trip. A lot of times I'd fly to Ohio and come back, for some of my positions, or I'd fly to DC and come back that same day. I might fly to DC, and if I had 2 or 3 meetings that week, I might stay for like 2 or 3 days, then come back. And typically you'll get about 1 day of an administrative day. The administrative day is really for you to do your expenses, catch up on paperwork, study. You might have some internal meetings, things like that. And so you understand as well from a compensation perspective, MSLs are paid relatively well. They earn on average about $150,000 a year. It could go up to $250,000, $260,000 if you're a really experienced MSL. You have many years under your belt and you're sought after, especially if the disease state is something that you really understand well. You have a niche area that you kind of focus on. So they get paid pretty well. They also get stock options. So if you go to a company, especially if it's a smaller company just starting out, you could do really well with stock options. For me, for example, one of the companies that I worked at, I made a boatload of money just from the stock. I made tons of money from the stock. So a lot of times that can be even more than the salary. So these are things you have to think about when you are considering different positions. Larger companies, your Mercks, your Pfizers, your Novartis, right? They're going to be, they're probably going to give you some stock, right? Depending on your level. But as you can imagine, the stock won't move that much in terms of the share price. So it may not be as attractive in terms of additional revenue for you, as it might be, let's say, for a small biotech that's starting out, and then they're going to do an IPO eventually, and now you're going to get something that's big, or they're going to get acquired, and the stock's going to move, and that could be a big hit for you. So these are things that you have to consider when it comes to different types of positions, and whether or not these positions are suitable for you in your situation. Last thing I'll say about that is that sometimes you'll get a company car, or you'll get a car allowance. It could be $600-$800 a month if you're using your own car, but all your expenses are covered. So, like me, when I went to Manhattan, my Easy Pass was covered, my parking was covered, all those meals will be covered typically, especially if you're overnight. Any of your travel expenses, all that type of stuff will get covered by the companies. You don't have to worry about any of that type of stuff. Okay. So I hope this video was useful for you guys and really helping you to understand everything about the MSL role. Again, my name is William Solomon. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments section below. I'm going to put a bunch of links below as resources for you to think about when it comes to whether or not you're looking to break into the role, or you're looking to increase your career mobility and opportunities as a current MSL. So that's maybe another video that I'm thinking about making, is for current MSLs and how to really improve your career options and move up. All right. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.